Welcome to Two Histories, where every story has two sides. I'm James Whitfield.
And I'm Norman Lee. Today we're exploring the Taiping Rebellion.
From 1850 to 1864, the Qing dynasty was torn apart by an internal explosion. We are talking about one of the deadliest civil wars in human history.
To understand it, we have to look at a strained empire. China faced massive population pressure, severe land shortages, and the constant risk of famine.
Add in the humiliating aftermath of the First Opium War and failing imperial institutions, and the country was a powder keg.
Exactly. Which brings us to the central question. Was the Taiping Rebellion a religious revolution, a social revolt, an anti-Manchu uprising, a state failure crisis, or all of these at once?
It started with one man, Hong Xiuquan. He was a Hakka scholar from Guangdong province, whose family invested heavily in his education.
For families like Hong's, passing the civil service exams was the clearest path to mobility and official status. But he failed the rigid exams repeatedly.
Those failures triggered a crisis. After his 1837 failure, he suffered a severe nervous breakdown, falling into days of feverish visions.
In those visions, an old man told him to slay demons. But Hong did not understand the meaning until 1843, after reading a Protestant tract by Li Hongzhang.
That tract unlocked everything for him. He concluded the old man was God the Father and that he himself was Jesus' younger brother.
Taiping texts later presented this as a literal truth. Hong believed God had given him a divine mandate to exterminate demons and establish a new heavenly kingdom on earth.
Those demons were identified as the ruling Manchu Qing dynasty, as well as traditional idols. So from their side, this was a holy war.
They formed the God-worshipping society in Guangxi, attracting marginalized people. As a Han subgroup with migrant community status, Hakka communities often clashed with local populations.
The new faith gave them profound unity. That cohesion fueled their rapid growth. In January 1851, at Jintian, Hong formally declared the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom.
It became a revolutionary state aiming to replace the imperial system. They surged north, capturing Nanjing in 1853 and renaming it Tianjing, or Heavenly Capital.
They did not just want to change rulers. They wanted to fundamentally restructure society. Their 1853 land system outlined a program of radical egalitarianism.
Yes. It declared that all land should be divided equally based on family size and regardless of sex. At least on paper, the plan was more ideological blueprint than fully implemented policy.
It has often been described as a kind of agrarian communalism, or even proto-communist in later interpretations. They proposed organizing society into 25 family units, right?
Exactly. Each unit was to share a public treasury and a church, managed by a group officer. The official program suggested all life cycle events would be funded communally.
That is an incredible vision. But how did they plan to handle production? The official land program called for mandatory subsidiary work during the agricultural off-season.
It stated women should weave and grow silkworms, and every family was supposed to raise 5 hens and 2 hogs. They aimed for total rural self-sufficiency.
Did they actually follow through on gender equality? They banned foot binding, which was a massive break from traditional Chinese customs, and women initially served in female military units.
They did, but that utopian promise quickly turned into militarized control. Texts like the Taiping Ode for Youth show they still promoted strict patriarchal family hierarchies regarding wives and daughters.
So it was a complex blend of radical reform and severe discipline. They enforced a puritanical moral code, apparently even separating married couples into different camps in the early years.
Yes, violations of their strict rules could mean execution. They completely banned opium, gambling, tobacco, and alcohol. This extreme control terrified the traditional Chinese gentry.
How did the Qing military apparatus react to all this? The traditional forces, the 8 banners and the Green Standard armies, repeatedly failed to contain the Taiping advance.
Those traditional imperial forces simply were not prepared for a massive ideological civil war. The Qing survival came down to local elites stepping in to save the state.
You mean local leaders like the scholar official Zeng Guofan? He organized a provincial Hunan militia, the Xiang army, entirely outside the traditional military structure.
Right. In his 1854 proclamation, Zeng Guofan framed the war not just politically, but as a sacred duty defending Confucian civilization against a heretical threat.
He said the Taiping insulted the spirits of ancestors and that Confucius was weeping. He countered their holy war with a ruthless defense of traditional Chinese culture.
The Zeng's family letters show intense Confucian self-discipline. He demanded frugality and absolute hierarchy to restore order. And his Xiang army became a decentralizing survival mechanism.
That is an important point. These regional armies drew heavily on new fiscal tools like the Li transit tax, allowing provincial commanders to sustain their own forces independently of Beijing.
Meanwhile, the Western powers were watching nervously from Shanghai. At first, Britain and France were officially neutral. In fact, they were fighting the Qing in the Second Opium War.
The Taiping probably hoped the foreigners would be natural allies. But British officials became increasingly pragmatic as the rebellion threatened treaty port trade and key silk-producing regions.
Westerners debated this. Thomas Taylor Meadows, a British consul, initially thought the Taiping might be better trading partners than the corrupt Qing bureaucracy.
True. But Sir Frederick Bruce, the British minister, saw the Taiping as chaotic. The British felt they needed a stable government to collect customs duties and enforce their new treaties.
And once the Qing signed new treaties granting more concessions in 1860, many Western officials decided a compliant Qing dynasty was safer for business than an unpredictable Taiping regime.
So, when Taiping forces threatened the lucrative port of Shanghai, neutrality vanished. Local Qing officials and Western merchants quietly funded a mercenary force to protect the city.
Around Shanghai, neutrality became increasingly porous as local Qing officials, Chinese merchants, and foreign interests backed foreign-led forces without immediate full-scale British state commitment.
The American adventurer Frederick Townsend Ward recruited a ragtag group of Western sailors and deserters. They were called the Foreign Arms Corps. British naval officers initially despised them.
They were a rough group, but they won a surprising victory at Sunjiang. This proved to the Qing that Western military tactics and firearms could be highly effective.
Ward's activities caused diplomatic trouble because they strained official neutrality. It was not until 1862 that British policy moved closer to open military cooperation around Shanghai.
By then, Ward's force had evolved into the ever-victorious army. It consisted of Chinese soldiers trained and led by foreign officers, officially recognized by the Qing throne.
Ward was mortally wounded at Sushi. The command passed through a turbulent transition after his death before a British Royal Engineers officer, Charles Gordon, took over.
Exactly. Under Gordon, this force became a highly mobile, lethal asset. They fought alongside the forces of Li Hongzhang, systematically breaking Taiping sieges around the treaty ports.
Gordon's strategy was effective. He used shallow draft steamers, like the Hyson, to dominate the canals. They could rapidly transport artillery and outflank the Taiping infantry lines.
This combination of Western mobility and Chinese manpower was revolutionary. It became a template for Li Hongzhang, who realized China had to adopt Western military technology to survive.
Not all Westerners supported this alliance against the rebels, did they? Augustus Lindley claimed close service with the Taiping and became one of their fiercest foreign defenders in print.
Lindley is a fascinating outlier. In his 1866 book, Taiping Tianquo, he fiercely condemned British intervention. He argued that Britain betrayed a progressive movement to protect opium revenues.
Lindley's accounts humanized the Taiping. He claimed to have assisted Taiping military operations, including artillery instruction and running blockades.
Lindley even claimed that his wife, Marie, fought alongside the Taiping, though this depends heavily on his own account.
The British missionary Joseph Edkins visited Nanjing in 1861. He tried to correct Hong's theology, particularly his rejection of the Trinity and his belief that God had a physical body.
But Hong completely rejected the corrections. Much of his authority rested on his claimed heavenly visions, not on orthodox Western missionary interpretation.
Exactly. If Hong accepted orthodox theology, he would invalidate his own divine mandate. His authority was deeply tied to his claimed visionary journey to heaven.
We see the final desperation in the 1864 deposition of Li Hongzhang. He was one of the last great Taiping generals, captured shortly after Nanjing fell while trying to escape.
He wrote that massive deposition in a cage, waiting for execution. He gave an insider account of why the Heavenly Kingdom collapsed, blaming Hong's isolation and the internal purges.
He also admitted they had alienated the population with endless forced requisitions of grain. The Taiping had stopped being liberators and became occupiers facing famine.
Meanwhile, the Qing armies were tightening the noose. One of the darkest moments came at Suzhou in 1863. Taiping leaders agreed to surrender to Li Hongzhang and Gordon.
The Taiping Wangs expected their lives to be spared, but Li Hongzhang immediately had the surrendered Taiping kings executed, seeing mercy as a sign of weakness.
Gordon believed the surrender terms included protection for the Taiping leaders. When he learned of the executions, Gordon was so furious he reportedly hunted for Li Hongzhang with a gun, according to later accounts.
That is brutal. It showed the massive moral friction between the foreign officers and the Qing commanders. To Li Hongzhang, eliminating rebel leadership was an absolute necessity. The war was total.
Gordon eventually cooled down and resumed his command, but the ever-victorious army was formally disbanded in May 1864. The British felt their commercial interests were finally secure.
They disbanded it just before the final climax. In July 1864, Zeng Guofan's Xiang army breached the walls of Nanjing. Hong Xiuquan had already died.
The fall of the city was apocalyptic. The Qing troops showed absolutely no mercy. They massacred the remaining Taiping defenders and the civilian population trapped inside.
Many Taiping loyalists refused to surrender when the city fell. Reports suggest some fought to the death or perished in the fires that consumed the city.
It is horrifying, a tragic end to a utopian dream. When we look at the overall death toll, the numbers are staggering.
Many estimates place the death toll somewhere around 20 to 30 million, though exact numbers remain debated.
Yes, the demographic studies are chilling. Cao Shuji's population history maps out the regional losses using county gazetteers. Parts of the lower Yangtze were devastated.
It was not just battlefield casualties. Millions died from famine, disease, and the utter collapse of the agricultural infrastructure. Entire districts were practically depopulated.
Following the fall of Nanjing, Qing imperial forces and allied militias initiated severe purges against perceived Taiping supporters in many affected regions.
Because the Hakka had provided so many early recruits, they were deeply suspected. In some regions, Hakka communities associated with the rebellion faced severe reprisals, including village destruction.
Stephen Platt, in Autumn in the Heavenly Kingdom, reminds us that this was not an isolated domestic event. It was a global crisis overlapping with the American Civil War.
It is striking to think about that parallel. While America was fighting over union and slavery, China was bleeding out over a syncretic Christian vision and anti-Manchu revolution.
And the consequences changed China forever. On paper, the Qing dynasty won. They crushed the rebellion. But that victory was also a delayed collapse.
Right. The dynasty survived, but only by empowering regional Han commanders like Zeng Guofan and Li Hongzhang. The Manchu banner forces were exposed as badly weakened and no longer sufficient to save the dynasty on their own.
The state also found itself increasingly relying on foreign-linked treaty port systems. That massive shift in power significantly weakened the central government in Beijing.
It helped expose and deepen the structural weaknesses of the Qing state. It is often argued this decentralization helped set the stage for the later warlord era.
That realization sparked the self-strengthening movement. Li Hongzhang and Zeng Guofan started building modern arsenals and shipyards. They even sent students to the West to study engineering.
It was a desperate attempt to modernize. They recognized that the Western guns which saved them from the Taiping could easily be turned against the Qing throne tomorrow.
So the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom failed to replace the Qing, but it inflicted a fatal wound. It showed the immense explosive potential of the Chinese peasantry when mobilized by a radical ideology.
Exactly. Even early Chinese revolutionaries like Sun Yat-sen looked back at Hong Xiuquan with admiration. They saw the Taiping as an imperfect but heroic first attempt to expel foreign rulers.
Later, Marxist historians also claimed the Taiping legacy. They framed it as a proto-communist peasant uprising, praising the communal property laws while criticizing the religious elements.
That's the part that makes the Taiping hard to categorize. It was a religious crusade, an agrarian revolution, and a catastrophic civil war all at once.
And it forces us to reconsider the role of Western intervention. Forces like the ever-victorious army acted as political mechanisms to help preserve commercial stability.
Without foreign support around the treaty ports, the Qing victory may have been slower and more uncertain, though the Taiping were already weakened by internal division and severe logistical strain.
The tragedy of the Taiping Rebellion is how a movement that began with promises of great peace and universal brotherhood ended in the most devastating violence of the 19th century. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment.
Find us on YouTube at Two Histories. Hit the bell for updates.
Thanks for watching Two Histories. I'm James Whitfield.
And I'm Norman Lee. See you next time.